Oh my goodness. Seriously, I have to just do it. It's like I can tell myself I don't have to think about things that don't matter.
I was designed to do those things. How the hell does this guy know this about me?
It's impossible to not see.
When Dan read for my sister, she was like, he's psychic. She's like, how did you know that?
Yes.
She's like, it's human design, guys. Like, it's just a testimony of how legit it is.
Seriously, Danny was like FBI or CIA. He's like, how the hell does this guy know this about me?
Having my chart read, there were just thing after thing after thing that I was just like, wow, that's me.
This man is reading me and I've never met him before.
I was in the midst of one of the biggest emotional waves I've ever been in my life, and he saved my life.
It seems like everybody has the same reaction. It's that aha moment, and they want to find out more. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Human Design Advantage podcast. My name is Jen, and decoding the matrix for us is Danny Guru.
Jennifer, how are you? It's great to be here.
I'm doing better today. Doing pretty good.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yes.
That's super good to hear. And it's sunny out here too, so I'm liking it. It's been a good day.
Yes, it is sunny here. So that's always nice. It was rainy a little bit yesterday, but yeah.
I forgot for sure which episode last week when we did it, so I don't know if I had the right one. I think I said number 17.
This is number 17.
Okay.
You were off, I think, one number last week. But
Yeah.
We are on episode number 17 today. We're going to be going over the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And today is August 28th. 2022, guys. And before we dive into today's episode, please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the show and all those good things that you guys know what to do.
The lines of consciousness. I forget exactly how we titled the show. I think it was the six lines.
It was line by line. What do the 6 lines mean and how do they work?
Yes. So basically, I thought this would be a good one. Savannah was plugging for it. I still want to talk about human design in the Bible, but maybe we'll do that another time.
I'm all for that conversation.
I got a little bit of pushback because I guess that would be political and stuff. So currently, Jen, Human Design Advantage is still voting on that, I guess. Me and you are. So this is cute. I love it.
I'll say this on that.
Please.
I think it is important that we have conversations like that. And if the thoughts of, political or,
Dicey.
You're afraid to have. Yeah, but it's important to bring these conversations because we are still stuck in our 7-centered way because we don't have these conversations.
And it's so ugly, this old way. It's really just not us, isn't it? It's just so ugly.
It goes with how you're going to have that conversation. And yeah, it may trigger some things, but it's important that we view those triggers.
Well, God said we're supposed to ascend. Here we are in these 9-centered vehicles. And I think this was one of the promises that was delivered in the Bible. So that would have been one of the things we would have talked about. But moving on to these lines of consciousness, this could be a good segue into something like that, just, type of thing, because these lines of consciousness, my God, have they made us aware. Think of what we all do, Jen, when we start to truly understand our profile, how helpless we are to that bad boy, right? It's like, I'll help it. I'll fix that. No, you won't. There's no fixing that, right?
Yeah, my profile, the more that I go through the experiment, the more that it is spot on accurate to what it is.
It really,
which is your superpower too, because once you embrace it, then
right. And these lines, they drive right into these profiles. We always have 2 profile lines, and so just knowing the basics of the line, you start to understand. Okay, if it's red in my body graph, like the second line of the profile, the second carat digit, then you start to realize I have to sort of discover that. It's like I don't really have full contact to it. I find myself in it, but I have to sort of discover it, and then I realize it's a way in my life. And that first line we identify with so profoundly that really it's what we what we think we're seeing the most, and then marrying these two together starts to help people realize, oh my God, there is a marriage between the personality black set of information, which is measured at the time of birth, and then the body's consciousness, its conscious awareness, which is measured 88 degrees of the sun prior to birth. That's what gives us our red lines. The years are different. That's why they're the same planets, but different numbers.
Yes,
because they're two separate calculations. They're fully separate, about a trimester of during the course of a pregnancy, about a trimester apart are these two calculations.
I guess I have to go back. How did the number 88 come into
Well,
play?
it's like, I'm not quite sure how.
Okay.
Well, I know how it came. Ra was told that this was the number, but it was. I always look at that 88 degrees a lot like Back to the Future when I said it was 141 gigawatts or whatever the number was. Remember?
88 miles per hour.
Right, and they had to, and the thing was 181 gigawatts. Remember, the professor? He's like, I knew it. It's sort of like that. It's just one of those calculations. When you back it up that way, you realize that's what we get. We get to have that separation, basically, so that separate in time makes two different calculations, and one calculation has to get along with the other.
Yes.
So it's the personality we understand the most. So as we talk through these lines, we'll be talking very much in terms of what you identify with. Every single gate defined in our body graph comes with a line designation, 1 through 6. So they form our consciousness, what to do. If we wanted to, Jen, we could actually just read profile for a person. Never even pull up a body graph. Just, oh, you're this profile. Let's talk about that. We never even look at the figure of the body graph, all that information. I guess we put it in a type. Talk about a type and a profile. It'd be a good idea. But you could even do just profile without even talking about type.
Yes.
You really could, because it's independent of the information in a sense.
And I feel that it would be the one that you would most recognize first.
Yep. Well, yeah, that, and you know what, between profile and type, they could really go neck and neck on that. They're certainly, profile, I think, is probably almost the strongest, but they probably go neck and neck depending on who you're talking to, because if we just talk type, then that is obviously, everyone will identify with that as well, usually. Or try hard to not identify with it. It's one or the other.
Right, yes.
Right. So,
yes.
Oh, poor us, man. This journey, we get hazard pay.
I had that. The anger thing was what really got me.
Yeah,
but now that I'm recognizing it, I'm like, oh, there is that. Yeah, there's that energy comes up.
Yeah, you know what got me with type was this skipping steps and frustration that can explode into anger that I can't identify with after, because it was just a frustration in the first place. So it can explode, but it happens so quickly that as soon as it dials down a moment later, I can't really identify with it. I'm back to the frustration. I remember sort of coming across that, and I was like, oh God, that actually sounds dangerous sometimes. You guys are aware of it, so you can be aware I'm getting angry, and the frustration goes so high. It happens to be like what I told you had happened on that phone call with my family last week, where I just got mad and then I hung up. But anyways, yeah, so skipping steps was something that really, I was like, I'm supposed to skip steps. I know it. This is me.
That's always a relief.
Yeah, right. Like off the hook for our open centers, Jen. You and I were under no pressure. Go figure. Do you believe that yet? I still have a hard time with it sometimes.
Yeah, no, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. I'm recognizing that. I'll say this. So, since I wasn't feeling good, where before, like at the beginning of August, I was under pressure. And then my body I just didn't feel good. So I practiced self-care and I rested. And now I'm like, I have no pressure. I'm like, oh, I need to find that middle ground.
Maybe not. I don't know. Let's see how long it sticks around. It shows up in the glow of your spirit, Jennifer.
Yeah, I
I love
recognize
that you're easy to read in this way when you know you're good enough. I adore that. I hope I'm just as easy to read. Anyways, these lines, our first illustration for these lines to help people really understand what we're looking at is a house. Now, there's a lot of pictures of this house. I had snapped one and thought about sending along, but this is the
Hi,
easiest way.
Savannah.
Hey, Savannah.
Hey, so we're getting a little late, off and on. I just had to finish getting ready. But I'm here.
Bonnie, you have a permanent excuse. You have 4 generator children, so you can do no wrong, essentially. As long as you're being a mom, you got probably biggest job on the planet right now. But this house, so we're into the house. We're into this house, and we're into just the representation of what these lines are doing. We have 6 lines per hexagram. Everyone has seen now that there's hexagrams. There's 64 of them. They all have 6 lines each. It's in the name, hexagram. So the first line always, if you have a first line in your profile or on any of your activations, the gates, yep, and this is the foundation making. This is all about introspection, and it can be keynoted with the chameleon. The first line will always blend in until it has its foundation, until it's done its investigation, look things over. And that's why it's the foundation, because it's constantly building foundational stuff. So if this picture had showed an actual foundation, that first line would be, the foundation itself. But the second line ends up being like the first floor of the house. Windows are open, people walk by, everyone can look in and see what's going on with that second line. And that second line is unaware that anyone's even looking in on it until it's called out. And because there's always this bubble around a second line protecting it from influence, when it looks out the window, generally it's like, hey, how are you? Hi, because it doesn't know yet what's calling it out. It has to discover it through the act of being called. That's why second line can.
So you.
Yeah. It's, oops, hey, whoa, we're on a hunting trip. We're wearing what was it then? We're wearing an Indian headdress. Yay. Remember? We're discovering. Yeah. I am the power of now. This third line, second line is also a line of projection. I'll stay there on a couple more keynotes. Projection. It's like the radio projecting out. I might have something. I don't know what it is. I might have a knack. I tend to have knacks for things if I feel called out, because our body knows our second line nature. And when it truly feels called out, it's because our body's intelligence is saying, kid, you got a knack for this, whatever it is. Go check it out. You got a knack. You don't know what it is yet. That's a way inside of humanity, just like the investigator is a way. It's a genetic way. When we slice and dice it down to the genetic level, our famous geneticists, as they really start looking into this, they will find it. They will literally find it and catalog it differently than how they catalog other genomic discovery. That third line is like this spiral staircase between, I know it's a straight staircase, but look at it more like a spiral staircase between the first and the second lines, because it's in this binary between the third and the fourth where there's instability, not in a bad way, like, oh my God, that's an unstable person. It's the instability in comparison to the first and second lines. First and second binary are making a foundation where the first line is doing most of that heavy lifting. The third and fourth lines are this middle binary. We call it sort of an instability because it's a changing place. The third line is unaware still that it's still looking at its own gate. So lines 1, 2, and 3 are a gate theme. They're looking at their own gate, whatever gate number that is, but it's moving towards bumping into the other. So the third line's got a genetic way that always bumps into the other. It's adaptive. It's sustaining at its adaptation. It has to adapt because it bumps into things. Second lines don't necessarily adapt, and first lines won't even get involved. They will be the foundation that others adapt to. But third lines are like bumping into things, and in that bumping into things, look at it like a mixing bowl. Third line starts the mixing bowl process. So that's why we call it instability, because it's not foundational like the first 2 lines. And then other things with that third line, it's called the martyr because it bumps into things, because it's a trial and errorist. It must try and error and try and error. And then sooner or later, we'll stop calling it error and just say they keep trying and discovering. So the
I
third
was going to
one,
say, it sounds like they're investigating.
they're true, but they're investigating through literal trial and error without a foundation. So the third line will investigate with no foundation at all. The second line doesn't like to fully get called out with no foundation. They have to feel a foundation of a knack inside their body for it, or they won't take the call. So they still need foundation of some sort. But that third line needs no foundation. Boop, bump, and it moves things around. That's why the word instability. And when we move up to the fourth line, we're at the foundation of the second floor. That's how to look at it. And that's why that guy's out there on the balcony saying hi again, because he's on the foundation of the second floor. And this fourth line is looking to externalize the foundation. And where does it harmonize with? The fourth line harmonizes with the first line. There's a harmony there. So the fourth line is always willing to externalize in a networking way locally the foundations of the first line. So the fourth line is always harmonizing to wherever its first lines would be. So every chart has a mixture. And if you have a fourth line in your profile, you'll know that you see this fundamental friendliness that wants to turn into networking, and that networking is looking for opportunity. Now, this is all local, right? So you can only network with the people you get introduced to or bump into, I guess, but mostly you're introduced. And then what they're really looking for is the opportunity to be influential. Why? They're transpersonal. They are looking out over the circuit that they're in, over the channel. And they just want to be friendly and talk and transpersonalize. Blah, 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 blah. Fixedness is one way that you can look at a fourth line, because they've been given marching orders from the foundation below to say, hey, here's your foundation. So I'm this foundation. Well, how about these other foundations? I'm not that other foundation. I'm this foundation. Blah, 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 blah. Well, we found this chink in your foundation. We have to change it. I don't like that. Blah, 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 blah. And they don't like to be changed much. A well-adapted fourth line will listen to where there are chinks in the foundation they're externalizing. An unwell-adapted fourth line just gets broken. Just gets broken. Just gets broken. Yeah, 1 and 1 is 3. No, kid, it's 2. But I'm fixed. It's 3. No, it's 2, and it hurts. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to talk about, I've heard the analogy, because how you were saying a first line and a fourth line, they're in resonance with each other. You know, I've heard it. And then the second is in resonance with the fifth, the third with the sixth. Like I've heard it compared to like the piano. You know how when you play certain chords together, that makes this like beautiful harmony.
Yep.
Right. But if you combine like some of the other keys, it's just like really unpleasant. Yeah, right. Dissonance, and it doesn't sound good. So that's why I thought it was so fun learning about these lines in human design, because it can help explain like why you click with someone so easily, and while other people you just have a harder time getting along with. So like a 1-3 profile, that's me. You know, I would go, I mesh really well with another 1-3. That would make us that compatibility be, or with a 4-6 profile. And so like after learning that, I was like, it's just really fascinating to look at couples and their profiles, and not that they can't get along, even if the profile is in resonance, right? You can always make something work. But sorry, I'm like going off on this tangent here. But it would make sense because the first line is very introverted, very in their own inner world. But then you have the fourth line who's kind of opposite, where they're very social, very. So it makes sense why the first and the fourth line would go together. The fourth line would help pull that someone who's a first line out, and to come and be social. So it's almost like opposites kind of attract when it comes to these profile lines.
They do. And that fourth line, after it's done externalizing, what it really wants more than anything is have its externalizations become influential. Imagine when I first found human design, and my fourth line resonates with your first line, and both your guys' first line, and my second line resonates with Jen, your fifth line. So there's lots of harmony there. These harmonize is what I meant to say. in a similar thing. And so that fourth line starts spitting out what is exciting that they think is going to be influential, that they think is going to give an opportunity, that they think they'll have the opportunity to use in a networking fashion with a friendly way to become influential. So the fourth line sphere is a network, sort of closed in. It's contained.
So the fourth.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Because like the fourth line, there's like a saying that it's like the amount of your success as a fourth line is how well you take care of your relationships, right? Because the fourth line, that's where they get all their opportunities for like a job or work or a relationship. So they really have to like take care of their relationships. But also can't the fourth line be kind of stubborn? Like they don't like to be influenced by other people. They like to be the one doing the influencing. And if you try and change a fourth line, that really pisses them off.
Yeah, that's what you said, Savannah. It's fixedness. We keynote it with fixedness. It's a good. It's just a good, simple keynote that you can flesh out in any conversation.
And but then I've also heard with the fourth line, since relationships are such a big deal to them, they are very sensitive to rejection and criticism. And if they can just close off their heart to people in their relationships and kind of become nitpicky and kind of mean back. Well, that's just how what I've read from it. I'm sorry, John, you're like a 2-4, so I'm like, is this how it is for you?
No, it's true. Well, the fourth line chooses what to network with. Its friendliness comes from within its own network, and the larger its network over time, the more successful is the fourth line. Fourth lines are tending their network. So someone can actually insult the fourth line, and the fourth line will have its behavioral norm of abdication, and it'll abdicate that first time. At some point they'll get pissed, but they abdicate in order to keep the relationship there. Fifth lines don't abdicate. When you get to the fifth line, now again, that was a natural process. That's a natural process for a fourth line. They're not getting walked all over. They're made an influential decision that their network is more important than they're feeling at that moment. So they abdicate. They step aside.
So you could be like talking to a fourth line and be like, yeah, and this and this and this. And they'll be kind of like, but then really they're like, that's whatever.
Right.
Right. Like,
yeah, watch for that in your fourth line counterparts. Watch for their eyes and when they start to dial out.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing. And their energy and their phraseology, everything that will be happening in motion if you're talking to them directly starts to become, you can tell that casual tacit agreement. That's just what you just said. Yeah, it's like ing someone. It's like, yes, ma'am, to death.
Yeah, because my sister's a 4-6, and there's been so many times we've had like these deep, long conversations, and she's like she's struggling, looking for answers, and then you're like, well, maybe try this or this or this, and she's like, okay, I'll do it, and then like nothing ever changes.
Right. No, you won't.
And it's just more of the same, and like not to rip on like a fourth line person or anything, but when you were teaching me about a fourth line, it just totally made me draw into my sister and where she abdicated me, right? Like she's just like, I'm gonna do that, and then it's like, nope, she's still gonna do what she wants to do. That fixedness of that fourth line.
And that's how it learns, by the way. So everything gets learned in juxtaposition to that fixedness. So I have fixedness that nope, the world is never going to end, and a tsunami comes flying at me. Trust me, I will adjust to that new information, and my fixedness will change.
I would hope so.
Yeah, right. So we don't have to worry about it being, too much so, but sometimes it does appear a lot. And when you move to this fifth,
wouldn't you also say fourth lines are kind of stubborn, kind of more stubborn out of all the other lines?
I don't know about that, Savannah. I'm not sure. It's difficult because they all have their stubbornness in their own way.
Yeah.
It's hard. Certainly it would show up in certain ways, but I don't know. Second lines can be wicked stubborn. Third lines are plowing through. First lines are investigating. I mean, they're all sort of stubborn.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I would say that. I would.
Yeah.
In their own ways, because it depends on whatever it is that they're doing. I mean, when I'm in an investigation mode, there's nothing that's stopping me.
Right, exactly. And then add in type to that, and you get other versions of stubbornness. And God forbid you have the channel of struggle, and then you're designed of stubbornness, regardless of your profile. So yeah, a lot of things will go into that. Stubbornness would be one of them. The fifth line, This fifth line is essentially, according to the I Ching, the old Chinese over 5,000-year-old text, and carried through till now. That fifth line is really the end of the hexagram process, in a very substantially, because the sixth line is up on the roof. The fifth line is what, if you go through all of the hexagrams and read them in the back of the book, you'll find that the fifth line is what all the first lines are the foundation to. You know, you take the 59-1, and that's the caveman, cave woman. You know, in bonding and interaction, they see it and they're like, okay, and they go whack it over the head and take it home. That's sort of, it's the brute force version. But the fifth line of that is the Casanova and the femme fatale and the seducer or the seduced, and that's what all Hollywood movies are not about first lines. They're about the fifth line, because that's what we all want to see. Hollywood thinks they're unique and all of that. They are helpless, but to portray fifth line movie themes, that's what people want to see.
Because the fifth lines have kind of like a charisma about them, right? And everyone's projecting onto that fifth line what they're wanting in someone, right?
Right. So we talked about the harmonies now. So if the second line is projecting outward, just like a radio, and if someone comes along into that radio frequency, they will then project onto the second line. It's like, hey, you might have a knack for this, or they might call that second line out. Fifth line is up sort of in the second floor, but instead of the windows open and the blinds totally available, the blinds are closed mostly, and they're peering out. They're peering out because, unlike this line of projection for the second line, the fifth line's projection is the other's projection on them. So the second line is the radio just broadcasting. So if someone drives by, they pick up the signal. But the fifth lines, that's not the case. Everyone's projecting on the fifth line from across the world. Doesn't matter where they are. In that projection, all fifth lines have this beautiful opportunity when they accept it. If they're projecting on me, I can accept that projection. And that's why the fifth line is keynoted with all this beautiful stuff. It has to be practical. They have to be able to assume a form of sort of like the general's position. They can come out and save the day. They are a heretic, in that way. They will bring a heresy because the fifth line is here to universalize. Fourth line transpersonalizes stuff. Fourth line externalizes, meaning they're just in their immediate network. Whoever will listen, I'm externalizing within earshot. And it's the fifth line that universalizes, which is a different concept. It's because they're receiving projection from everywhere. They have the opportunity to bust way out of their network and universalize across the globe in a single word. We saw that when we were studying, I think it was Barack Obama, when we realized he's not a 6'2", he's a 5'1".
Yes.
We were looking at these profiles. So
yes.
One way I've also heard the difference between a fifth and a fourth line is the fifth line is here to like really bump into and interact with just complete strangers to kind of like impact and influence their life. Whereas a fourth line is more supposed to keep within their small community and their friends and family, like who they influence.
Their network. Right. And their network will bring the newness to them. Whatever's coming in will come in new through the network. And whatever's coming in new to the fifth line does not have to come in through any network. There is no rhyme or reason to where it comes in. They are universalizing what is the scoop. And that's why they get called a heretic, because sometimes what they're universalizing is too new for the world. But because of their seductive power to draw people in, it becomes a heresy. Second lines don't get burned at the stake for their heresies. They have plenty of heresy. I got called into this new thing, blah, 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 blah. But then as soon as somebody wants to stop listening to a second line, they stop listening. But the fifth line is seductive. It's powerful. It brings like the 34-5, annihilation of the old way so that the new way can come in, but not fully at the expense of the old way.
Yeah.
We have an old. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, or are you going to say something, Jen? Or
no. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Something I recently was learning about the fifth line, like you see how the window is like dark.
Yeah.
But then on the second line picture, their window's like open.
Yep.
And so how I've heard it explained is like the fifth line. I lost. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my
Well,
train of
just
thought.
sort of how it's
But
peering
where
out.
they can feel like people don't really see them for who they are. Like they can't really see in to a fifth line profile person, but because everyone's constantly projecting onto them who they are and what they should do and what they should be.
And what
And
they
so,
want from them. What they want
Yes.
from them. That's
I
the
have
thing. That's the
I have
biggest
something to
killer.
say on this.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I'm learning. I'll say, going through my life being a 5-1, I can now recognize all these projections. But at the time, what was being projected on me, it was very easily to get lost. And is this me, or is this, am I really doing this? Now that I am recognizing that people are projecting on me, it's kind of serves as a mirror, because people do this is a learning lesson I'm learning as a manifestor too, because when people have that projection on me, my first question now is, am I informing? What happens when I inform? Because that projection could change. But a lot of people do, like for me, I do get lost in, like, people don't know exactly who I am, or it's a misunderstanding. And people project all the time. It doesn't necessarily need to be on a fifth line. I think society has gotten into the habit of projecting their stuff onto other people.
Yes.
But once you recognize that it is projection, and I myself, I'll do it with other people too, but learning and recognizing what the fifth line is, I realized that it's a superpower, because I can help people in this way. Whatever they are projecting on me really has nothing to do with me. I'm really standing as a mirror. And whatever that projection is, they can allow themselves to take a deeper look, because it's really revealing who they are. We are just, with the curtain
Right.
over us, seeing it. It's a different view.
I love that. I love that. And as a younger person, that would be why, until you started to truly know your profile, that you would have lived with the growing sense of paranoia. What do they want from me? Someone approaches you and you see them eyeballing you and they're approaching in on you. It's what do they want? I remember being in Georgia last year. There were times where it was like, I could see the expression on your face. What is this? What does she want now?
Yeah. What do they want now? Well, I thought about this with my ex, because he's still vicious to this day with the stuff that he says to me. But, it's when especially if you're in an abusive relationship, it's hard not to attach what's being told to you. But now that I'm revealing it, I could totally see the fifth line at play, the heretic at play, because when he would get mad, it was like above and beyond of just nonstop.
Right.
And it really revealed who he was as a person in the process.
Right. So that's the attraction field, though. Think about that. So this is a genetic way in which humanity is meant to be attracted into each other. So this fifth and the second line are in incredible harmony to each other. You end up universalizing the very things that the foundational binary discovered and got called into. So we're moving up the hexagram from a foundation all the way up to the top. And this fifth line is basically seen as the top of the practical portion of the hexagram. And it's part of that third binary, which is all about transitioning out. Other things with this fifth line that we could keynote. What are some other things to keynote that fifth line with?
The practical leader. They're really good at like problem solving, people turning to them when they're in a time of crisis to help them out of it.
The general spot on. There have been moments in my life where I thought to myself, I must have been a general in a past life with how I'm reacting.
Well, here's another one.
High tense situations. I operate best under pressure.
That makes sense. Here's another one. It's attractiveness. All fifth lines they concern themselves with their general attractiveness. Now,
This will be like dressing nice, smelling nice, doing their hair. Because my husband's a 5'1", and when I
he
told
never
him,
walked out like a slob. He never
Yeah.
walked out like a slob. He can't.
Yeah.
He probably even smells nice.
oh yeah, he's always like making sure he smells good, has perfume. And my little Thatcher, he's a 5'1" too, or like a 5'1" profile also, and he is the same way. Like he cares what his hair looks like before he goes to school, and he flips out if he can't style it just the way he wants to, and he has to like make sure he's looking nice. And so it's funny that you say that. Like they
And
like
your 2-4 child is not the same. Sometimes she looks good, sometimes not. She's literally in her own little world.
yes, yeah.
So has Coco ever gone to school, for instance, like in pajamas? Remember that was a thing for a little while. Sometimes kids would go in pajamas. They would basically, that's what they would wear.
She's more about like comfort. Like she just would
Mhm.
rather be comfortable than super stylish. I mean, she cares about like clothes and she's getting into that, but you know, she's more like, man, I just want to wear this because it's comfortable, you know?
Right.
Also, one thing I've recently learned about fifth lines, because my husband's a fifth line, but it was saying in the book that fifth lines are actually scared to kind of show their real selves because they don't know if they can trust that person with like who they really are. They feel like people don't really know who they are, and they're scared to really be vulnerable and show their real selves because they're scared it will get rejected and or attacked. And so just learning that about my husband, it was funny because I was reading to him about the fifth line, and he was just like, yep, yep. Like everything was just so spot on.
Well, let's talk about that, Savannah. Let's talk about that generally. You were going to say something, Jen?
Yeah, I have a question. Was your husband bullied?
He was.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot. When he was younger.
Since that fifth line is always receiving this projection, they can easily become bullied. They can become ostracized. They can become burned at the stake, or they can become heralded, followed, all of that stuff. But the bottom line about this projection is all fifth lines are supposed to have what we keynote of as paranoia, not to live a paranoid life, you know, like at all times, but to have it as an awareness. What do they want from me? It's a perfectly healthy awareness. It doesn't mean run away at all the times or none of that. It's just recognize when the fifth line sees that until the world.
What is your motive?
What's your motive? Until the world truly wakes up the rest of the way. Fifth lines have to have that as a protective measure, because until someone truly knows a fifth line personality really well and they're super good friends and they've allowed the full breadth of their expression to show up over time, that fifth line can't be sure that that person actually even knows them.
Yes.
Because of this projection field. So imagine how lonely that can feel.
Yes. And he said those exact words, and it said in the book, they tend to feel very alone because people don't really know who they are, because people are constantly like, oh, do this for me. You can do this for me. Be this, be that. And so it's like they never get to really express who they are inside.
Or don't be this and don't be that.
Yeah, that
don't
too.
be that way. You know, that's just as common. It's both just as much. And so that fifth line has to really understand that the other understands them or not, and actually hold space. If the other holds space for them routinely, no matter where they are in a process, then that person starts to get to realize, okay, good enough. And then they can let down this guard you were just describing, Savannah, and this whole thing. But until then, it's no way.
It also said in the book, like fifth lines really have to communicate who they are, what they can and can't give. And like the more they communicate and kind of hold boundaries, it will actually protect them from becoming the villain in other people's stories. So it's like,
I agree with that, but because I am working on informing, because I do think that that's important. But there have been times in the past where I have communicated, and also the other person, it was like they weren't listening to anything that was coming out of my mouth.
Right.
And I don't know what the other person's profile was. For example, my ex, I remember us we got into a very vicious verbal argument in the car, and it was all over me agreeing with him. I was, and he would not, he was not hearing what I was saying, and I was trying to tell him what he was seeing was wrong, but yeah.
He was projecting upon you, Jen.
Oh, it's been.
And if he was open emotionally, then he was also amplifying your emotional wave.
He's probably non-emotional.
He was amplifying.
But
it. Yeah. So.
But yeah, now that I am aware of my lines, and I'm going back and I'm reviewing and investigating how it's played out in my life. Yes, and everything that the book is saying, Savannah and your husband. I mean, I tell Dan that all the time. I was like, I know that I have some level of PTSD, especially when it comes to people, but literally since birth, it has been a theme that plays out your entire life. Like, I was bullied and ostracized as a child. And when I went to elementary school, it was a Lutheran school, and 1 grade was the same classroom. So from 2nd to 6th grade, I was in the same classroom with the same kids, and it never changed. And the bullying started at 2nd grade. So by the time I got to 6th grade, I literally sat outside of the classroom because the bullying got so bad. That's
insane, Jennifer.
So
yeah, it wasn't so hard. Bullying is seriously the worst. It's like my husband. Sorry, he's probably be embarrassed if he knew I was telling you guys this, but like the wounds he received in like childhood from the bullying, like they're still with him today, and it like still has those insecurities inside of him that he still has to work through. And so yeah, it breaks my heart. Bullying is horrible, so horrible.
It's a very old thing to do, and it's not how our new way children will really be evolved. Imagine if you have your 5th line in the unconscious.
I know.
I don't know it's there.
My son rushed into 3-5, so I got lots of 5 energy in my family.
Well, imagine you're constantly attracting society. 5th lines attract society. They just attract society, what to do. And so imagine that's unconscious in you. That's defined on your design side. And you're wondering why your 3rd line's always bumping into things, and you're not even sure, but they seem attracted to you. So suddenly you think what you bumped into in your trial and error is going to be perfect, but you still have to go through a trial and error process. That can be very confusing. Hey, they didn't tell me about the error part of trial and error. I bumped into something that thought I was wonderful, and they projected that on me, and suddenly I'm exactly the opposite of wonderful because I went through my process of being me. Yeah.
Yeah. So that 5th line can be really, I feel like the 5th line, it's like, it's good because it helps attract opportunities to you. But then it can also be kind of hard on the other side because you are constantly receiving projections, and it's hard to meet everyone's expectations, right? That's what the 5th line does, is you attract people's expectations that you may or may not be able to fulfill. And so sometimes it can be really hard because I heard it say that 5th lines, people have higher expectations for them than the other lines. They're expected to perform the best or solve the problem the best. And so, but when they don't meet that, then they can get kind of like beat up, like in the not beat up, but you know what I mean, like upset.
Well, we beat ourselves up.
Yeah, they can beat themselves up, or in the relationships, their partner can be hard on them, like, oh, you let me down. Like,
it's been I'm seriously playing around with an idea of just doing a coaching program for 5s, and most likely narrowing it down for manifestors too, because what my 5 has done for me is why I am good at a lot of the stuff that I do is because I go above and beyond to learn it, because out of that fear of it not being, it is a form of perfectionism, but it it's like drills me to go above and beyond to learn to make sure that I know what I'm talking about.
When you're about to receive that projection of the other onto you, you want to have all that stuff in order above and beyond. And not to mention, it's not even perfectionism, and it's definitely not even OCD. I concern myself with all of these titles that we have floating around out there. We can talk about that another time, but instead of being those things, and we should, instead of it just being those things or those things included, think about it. You're actually perfecting that which attractiveness is. It's attractive, and attractiveness is one of the inspirational ways of a fifth line. Their unique creative expression is in the attractiveness of all the stuff they figured out above and beyond. Now, that's not a look. That's not nice hair. That's not nice clothes. That's now you can start to see it's a way. It's not just an appearance, I guess. It's a way. A human genetic way is that aspire to role, where their role in life as part of their creative endeavor is partly attractive. It has to, and I'm sorry, it's wicked sexy to know all the stuff about how to put on this podcast and make it all work, Jen. You know, it's very attractive. It's very seductive of you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's important because I myself, who have invested a lot in coaching programs and different coaches and stuff like that, the one thing that reoccurring thing that I have heard from people is, get past what other people think about you and, certain things. And I don't think that applies. Trying to tell a 5 not to worry about what other people think is, I don't even know if that's possible, but it's learning how to navigate and use, when people are projecting on us, learning how to communicate and explaining ourselves. And, ultimately you're serving the other person who is projecting on you, because you really are serving as a mirror. Very much so.
And let's move on to this 6th line then. So the reason the 6th line is sort of separate from, it's part of the hexagram process. It's a 6th line, but it serves in our genome. It serves as transition, as the mechanics of the chemistry of our genome is sewing itself up and doing its thing, right? Keeping us alive. It's constantly, the 6th line is always transitioning into the next. And we would want our genome to constantly transition into the next. It keeps an even flow. So since that 6th line is so responsible for the true transition of things, it sits on the roof and it has a theme that looks out over all of the circuitry. The 4th and 5th line are transpersonal lines. They're aware that there's something on the other end of what their gate theme is. They're aware of their gate theme, and they're aware that there's something on the other end creating a channel theme. So if you're a 12-4 or 12-5, you're ready to become a person of consequence because there's something on the other end, a 22, that's going to be ready to listen. And that's going to be emotional, and down comes the caution of gate 12, and it becomes a person of consequence. And that's what 5th lines do better than anything. They are people of consequence. They show up, in being of consequence, naturally in resonance with the 2nd line. But the 6th line is in resonance with the 3rd line, the martyr, the trial and errorist. So the 6th line is up on the roof because it literally has to look out over all of it. And they got them up there as if they're relaxing. They're not relaxed. Yeah. For about 20 years, they can sort of seems like they're relaxing as they're aloof up on the roof from 30 to 50. But in reality, they live a 3-part life cycle. They live that first part of their life as the martyr, the trial and error, the one that'll bump into anything, do this, do that, sustain at this, sustain at that. They tear down things and make new things. The 2nd part of their life, they're up on the roof. They've gone from being subjective, like subjectively in the world, acting as a 3rd line profile, for instance, into becoming aloof. Neither the 3rd line nor the 6th line. They're figuring out how they're going to transition into their 6th line flowering process at 50. These ages, by the way, they're written in stone. The ages are, around 30, around 50, but anyone can start to become their role model self throughout the whole life, for God's sakes. And that's why it's keynoted with the role model, because after they go through these two things, they are neither subjective or objective. They're just themselves. And that's sort of hard to wrap your head around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Isn't also the 6 sign people, they are all about like living authentically to who they are, not fitting that mold that they've been told to live in their life. They're the ones to like authentically express their design and encourage others to live authentically as themselves also, right? Because isn't that the 6 sign kind of embodies the whole, like the essence of what human design is all about, right? Like,
yes, we're supposed to be a 6. We're moving into a 6-line theme where our role models will become more important than ever, because think about it. So the 6th line depends what age they are. In that first 28 and a half years, they aren't a 6-line role model. They aren't the description of all the things you just pointed out. That's what they're moving towards. So there's a lot that goes on with this 6th line, and that's why it's up on the roof. It's in the transitional thing, and really the 5th and the 6th line are the upper binary, where they're totally transpersonal, and they are helping to transition us out. Right now, the 5th line is helping to universalize our transition into a 6th line phase. So where humanity is supposed to become its role model self and stop all this nonsense. You know, humanity was never meant to be controlled. We are not meant to be controlled. We're meant to control the environment so that the individual can thrive, not the other way around.
I've been watching a lot of historical documents lately, and we have always been in control.
Yeah.
Controlled in some way. I got on this kick of going back and learning about the English dynasty and just the stuff that they did in the name of just a name and who they were and land and everybody that got trapped in the middle, religion, those type of things.
It's very much so. So the 6 line's biggest obstacle is quickly, as they're approaching their late 20s and into their 30s, quickly people start to pick up on when they're not being their authentic role model self, which is a lot. In our current world, you know, we really have to get to our 6 lines and let them know to stop beating themselves up. Just be themselves. If they aren't, they get called out for hypocrisy. And then that projection, if you want to talk about a projection, it's a narrow projection, but it is hard. It's hardcore. It will ostracize that person quickly, fully, in so many ways. You know, 5th line's practical. They're used to it. They're the general. They'll just withdraw and wait for a new time to be consequential. 6th line will take this so personally that they may never come back from it, you know, depending on how conditioned they were. So we can't have our 6 lines saying one thing and doing another, essentially, unless they announce that. Hey, I'm saying this, but I am doing another. I don't want to be called a hypocrite, but you should do this. That might be true. You should still do it. It might be true that what they just said, that someone else should do the thing, but
so it's like, is it kind of like the high expression of a 6th line is they are these role models who have this like innate wisdom, and they kind of attract people to share their personal experience and their wisdom with, but then it's also, is it kind of like the low expression is they can be hypocrites? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Or like,
Yes, it shows up in this feeling of hypocrisy, and that feeling, it comes from the other. It comes from the people around them.
Okay.
Or is it also that 6 lines get called out quicker for being hypocrites than the other lines?
All day long.
Okay.
Absolutely. They'll get called out for that so quickly.
Are they being hypocrites, or just they're just not being authentic to themselves?
And or authentic to what they say. You know, so think of an open ego 4-6 profile. That open ego constantly kept saying, okay, I will, using their willpower to say they will do something an hour from now. And an hour from now, they may not feel like doing it. They feel like such crap. And then if they're that 4-6 profile, unconsciously becomes this nervousness because the other is going to call them out. Hey, you said you would.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So it can all, just think of how quickly all this stuff embroils. And I just named one open center. So we won't even get into these open centers. But
Mm-hmm.
just imagine the complexity of a design and how quickly that will embroil into it.
Mm-hmm.
Would
So
you say?
like the sixth line, the first 30 years, it operates as a third line where it's this trial and error process. They're making mistakes through these experiences. They craving that change and kind of adventure. And then once they turn 30, that sixth line kind of goes on the roof, kind of goes into like a hermit mode,
To
right?
lick its wounds. Yeah, to lick its wounds from having been so subjective about everything. Suddenly it
Mm-hmm.
realizes life isn't so good, and it starts to have that third line pessimism that goes along with the third line. You know?
And then isn't also that third lines are very resilient, right? Like they go through a lot of like mistakes and trial and error, but then isn't like that sixth line, they kind of lose that resiliency to
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
error. So is that kind of where that pessimism comes from, or where they kind of, that's why they also step back and become kind of a hermit and on the roof that
Right. On the roof, they're really truly looking out over everything else and surveying, what the hell have I done? You know, it's in the early 30s that most people, third lines, six lines, living out that third line phase will get divorced or have these big fat life changes or show up with either optimism or pessimism. So there's this thing that shows up with third lines. I mean, with six lines, that is perpetual to them. It's optimism. They keep being optimistic that they will in fact be their soulmate of their own selves. And they live that out very much in our seven-centered world now as seeing that soulmate in someone else. So yes, they absolutely are looking for their soulmate in certain ways. And they give us that idea of soulmates, which you fifth line people, Jennifer, you transpersonalize that and you make it show up in all the movies. That fifth line soulmate story, but it's really that sixth line ideal of how we're supposed to be. And that soulmate is really our red lines first. Soulmate will be the unconscious definition that is guiding the life. It's got authority over how you're going to make decisions. Those red lines, and those black lines are here experiencing those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're getting used to.
Dan, so like someone who's a 3-6 or a 6-3 profile, don't they kind of have it rough that first 30 years because they're operating as a 3-3?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the one who will have it the roughest would be the 6-3, because inside they know they're not fully a third line. They're constantly through a metamorphosis process. They're like a butterfly waiting to come out from the caterpillar, and they sort of know that, and so they can't wait to get out of that third line phase.
Oh, okay. Because I think it said in the book, like they can kind of really struggle with being pessimistic because that third line, that's kind of how sometimes the third line can operate, is like seeing how something doesn't work and sharing out why something doesn't work a certain way.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. So that's why they're on the roof of the house. They've got all of this three-part process going on, and they end up being the validator. Remember, in our genome, nothing moves until the six line transitions. So technically, the six line validates the lower five amino acids in the genetic structure. The six amino sort of validates that the lower five, we're copacetic. We can transition. If it's not, along comes a T cell and kills it. Not copacetic. You have an editing error. You're broken. You're going to mess up our human host. We're going to wipe you out. Or it will create its own apoptosis and die its own self. So the sixth line, we don't want to do that. So let's avoid the apoptosis. Humanity's apoptosis should not take place. We should be just fine. Apoptosis just means a cell that kills its own self because it knows it's broken. So
also the six lines, like when they're in that hermit mode from 30 to 50, isn't it also like they kind of like to not make decisions? Don't they kind of like to stay on the fence with a decision or an issue, and then they can kind of see both sides of it? And so sometimes when you try to like call them to like, hey, make a decision, like pick a side,
it takes longer to make a decision because they're they're in school at that point, heavily in school. That's when their first through 12th grade really starts, is at about age 30, between 30 and 50. And
And then, but 50 is when they come off the roof, right? And they go out to their friends, society, and kind of share that wisdom that they gained in that first.
And
50.
authenticate the 5 lines below it. Whatever their hexagram is, they're always authenticating it. So the 5th line heretic comes to town. Ra gives this example all the time. And he says, there's going to be a flood. You need to build an ark. And the villagers get nervous because the heretic is seductive. Maybe they need to build an ark. They don't know. They've seen many heretics come through and be wrong, and they've seen some be right. So they learn to go up on the hill and talk to the 6th line. And if the 6th line says, yeah, it looks like rain, then they will build that ark because it was universalized by the 5th line, new thing that showed up. And that power of the 5th line to universalize its truth and make an ark get built. That's 5th line business all day long. But the 6th line, if the 6th line says it doesn't look like rain, I think that guy's full of it like the last guy, then the villager's going to go down there and kick that guy out. Or if it's enough centuries ago, they're going to string them up or burn them.
Yeah, burn them at the stake.
Right. And
also, Dan, isn't also the first line, they're here to dig, find the foundation, gather all the information, and then share it out with the other profile lines, right?
Well, no, let's go through the lines. They show it out through the 2nd line. The 2nd line is part of that foundational binary. So the 2nd line is the radio broadcasting it. And all the millions of 2nd lines on the planet, 1.2 billion 2nd line personalities on the planet, are out there broadcasting what it might be through all the knacks that they have in their body graph. Every hexagram becomes a knack inside of a 2nd line profile. And then keep going with your analogy.
Oh, yeah. Well, sometimes it seems like, the 4th, 5th, and 6th line, it seems like they have such like a powerful way to like impact society as a whole. But something I can't remember where I read it, but it just said first lines and 2nd lines are supposed to kind of take the ground information, disseminate it out to those higher profile lines.
Well, through the 3rd line, that dissemination comes through that binary that's in between. The one I said that was unstable because it's constantly churning out the new stuff. So that 3rd line is like, hey, the 1st and 2nd line process already took place. So I'm going to go out and bump into things and I'm going to try stuff. We're going to mix it up, baby. We're not going to miss anything because we have 1.3 billion 3rd lines on the planet. They are in the process of mixing it up fully. And then the 4th lines take what that 3rd line did. Now it's transpersonal. Now the 4th line starts to transpersonalize that out to the other. They just start talking, hey, this is good. And then we get to this process you're referring to. Then the 4th and 5th and 6th lines become the transpersonal version of spilling out into the world the truth of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd lines. Let's move to the next slide. This was a great one. Transpersonal lines are energies that are all about experience in the relationships with the others and with society generally and outward. And interpersonal lines, these right angle lines, interpersonal lines are energies that are all focused and all about the personal experience and understanding themselves in it. Even the 3rd line that bumps into stuff is still interpersonal. It's still looking at its own process first while it's bumping into stuff. And the 1st and 2nd lines are oblivious to the other at first until they come along. We don't see the other easily. First, lines 1, 2, and 3 are self-absorbed. They don't have these transpersonal skills. Lines 4, 5, and 6 are transpersonal, and they get they can be highly agitated if they can't break through to lines 1, 2, and 3, because lines 1, 2, and 3 are self-absorbed with their own.
So like my 1-3 profile, they're both my lines are intro personal. So I'm very introverted. I like my alone time. Like I'd rather hang out by myself than go be like in a group of people. I think also being a projector plays into that too. But it was really interesting to me when I learned this because I don't really like social stuff. I mean, I like it, but sometimes it's kind of draining. I'd rather just go into my own little inner world, study what I'm interested in, and so like learning my 1-3 profile was very like validating to me that it's like, yeah, you're designed to be very introspective and kind of wrapped up in my own little journey. And sometimes I forget about the other person. And so sometimes people can take that personally when I do that. Like my husband, sometimes he's like, what the heck? So sometimes I have to like remind him like, yo, I'm a 1-3. Okay, don't take it personally. Like, I just kind of get kind of self-absorbed and wrapped up in my own little inner journey. And so,
How about you? So
Huh?
you got to transfer. Well, never mind. How about you? But moving along, look. Notice that the lower trigram and the upper trigram become a thing. The first three lines, the top three lines in our genome. That's called the lower triplet and the upper triplet of the codon process of stacking up 6 aminos.
Yeah.
64 codons, like there's 64 hexagrams, sewing up our genetic material 6 amino acids at a time, a lower triplet and an upper triplet. That's what they call it, genetic science.
There's like a science behind how it's set up, which is cool. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I still go back to the miracle of the Chinese I Ching and the Chinese in the hills of India somewhere. I mean, of China somewhere in North China, is what I heard, came up with this counting system that happens to be an exact replica of what our human genome is structured as.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I also think it's interesting, like, because the 1-3 profile is the only one that both lines are intrapersonal, and then also the 4-6 profile is the only profile that has both lines that are transpersonal. So, and then the other profiles are a mix between the two. They're both kind of extroverted and introverted, right? Isn't that another way to look at the lines and how they're paired together?
Sure, absolutely. So my 2-4 profile, that gets confusing. So here I am, a hermit, leave me alone. I'm waiting to have a knack for something and to have my special little natural gift show up, whatever it is. And so I'm doing stuff, but then I have this transpersonal line always calling me out to be friendly and get into the network. And you want to be influential, but that second line is like, I don't know what the foundation is. Line 1's got the foundation covered. I'm just a freaking radio frequency broadcasting it. I'm a paper tiger. Do I even have what they're asking for? They just pull me out. Am I any good at that? Am I any good? Add an open ego into that body graph, and am I any good is going to be a question that's going to show up an awful lot. Am I any good? Am I any good?
So, because your 2-4 profile, it's almost like binary. They're kind of opposite within one person. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And imagine those 4-6 profiles, they would have a hard time with lots of things because there's still not a transpersonal profile. That's still part of the right angle personal destiny profile, self-absorbed, yet both of their lines are transpersonal. So here they are talking and they're supposed to be an example. They can't help but to talk out and be their example, but it's the example of their own fixed trip. Their own interpersonal destiny, intrapersonal, meaning into themselves first, self-absorbed, self-concerned. So that's what how this hexagram breaks out. It's amazing.
And it's also interesting because, like, so a 1-3 profile goes best with a 4-6 profile, and the 1-3 is very introverted, but the 4-6 is very extroverted. So it makes sense why they would come together. Them being opposites, that extroverted friend is going to pull that introverted friend out into the, you know, like the community. And so it makes sense, like, why those kind of opposites would attract, and why certain profile lines have resonance with each other, and that chemistry with each other.
That resonance is also there for the same genetic function that the resonance is performed inside of the construction of the genome. This resonance is literally sitting there and being a part of a foundation for the thing above it. It's allowing the spiral up. And in genome, in genetic terms, it's like a spiral up. We're spiraling up. Just like the genome behind us, Jen, it's spiraling. And if we move to the next slide, it starts to explain this lower trigram and upper trigram. And you can see the transpersonal versus the intrapersonal versions of this. Lines 1, 2, and 3 are the investigator, the hermit, and the martyr. Trial and error, but it's mutative, it's adaptive. That's the third line. The hermit, the natural, that's projecting out their stuff. They're basically democratic about things because they don't want to get involved until they're really called. And the first line, the investigator, that is introspective. We call it the chameleon because they're not coming out, man. They are blending in like a chameleon until they know. And that's their protective method, methodology. And empathy is on here because they have to have empathy. The empathy causes them to listen so that they can get the intel they need for the foundation they're building. No one builds foundations truly all alone. We still are in a mix of all the other human beings on the planet, in aura to them or not. You know, they're in the field. We're all in the field, so they can't do it alone. You know, no man is an island unto themselves. 17:5. And then the upper one, the opportunist. Look at it. The names even sound like they're transpersonal compared to the, you know, personal destiny of the, you know, self-reflection inside of the first 3 lines. The opportunist. Well, that's not happening until there's the other. Friendliness, the abdicator, externalization is really the one to give them. Fixedness. This heretic, they're a heretic because they're universalizing something new. And notice they have projection in their name, just like the second line, Jen. We are both. These are the projection lines. People project on, or they see the projection of, one of the two, but they can intermix. I can be projected on to be something I am not, and you can be receiving a projection that you're just broadcasting out. We're both doing it. And then the 6th line, which is this role model. And who are they? You can't be a role model until there's other humans. If you're if you're one guy on a planet and you're the last remaining survivor, what are you the role model of? You know? There's only one of you. It's like the Lorax. There's only one tree left. Don't cut it down. Make some more. The role model needs others, and they have talents and gifts. Optimism is something that sits with them. Being a peacemaker is very much a thing that the role model will demonstrate. Same thing with administration. They can be very good administrators. I know plenty of 4-6 profiles that 6th line underneath, they were great administrators. They administrated. They administrated stuff. So here they are, the lines of consciousness working in us that show up as the profiles that we are, because we have red definition, which is our body's definition, and we have personality black line definition. They marry together and they give us our profile, and that becomes our consciousness and how it gets out into the world. It's rather
I really love once I learned the archetypes and themes of each of the 6 lines of consciousness, it helps you to, you can look at someone's chart and you're like, oh, they're a 2-4. And that it tells you so much about them when just knowing 2 little numbers, you know, like it helps you to know how to support them, how to also understand yourself and what you're needing. So that's why I love learning these 6 lines. And it also will tell you like the gate, how that gate is expressing according to what line is behind it. And so I feel like once you master and understand these 6 lines, I feel like it opens up so much for you in like the human design, like understanding people's charts and yourself. And so, yeah, I love learning about the lines. I think it's so
does. Let's go full screen, Jen. Wind this up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's wind this up. And I think this is great. We've gone through the lines of 6 lines of a hexagram. We've all seen that these hexagrams, no matter what hexagrams you have defined in your body, they have lines 1 through 6 attached to them. So they will carry that theme, even if it's counterintuitive to your actual profile. You got to get used to all of these things that are going on, and how profile actually equals 70% of the life in essence. We can't make that a hard and fast number because sometimes profile will have nothing to do with what just happened, but profile is, you can really drive it into about 70% of how you're reading a person is through this profile in that sun earth, those hexagrams that made that profile. Awesome.
I've noticed that profile, it usually really, really resonates with people. I know it did for me when I learned my 1-3.
Me too.
Resonates for me.
So I feel like it's such an important part of human design. Like there's the type, then there's the profile, then there's the definition, then the incarnation cross. But I will also say, sorry, I just got a notification. Oh yeah, so like I have gate 50.5. So gate 50 is all about like responsibility, and what I've noticed is people are constantly projecting onto me that I'm a responsible person and I can handle a lot of responsibility. And so like that's what's kind of fun to go through your chart and look at like what are my gates with the 5th lines in them. Because then it can help explain, unlike gate 43. So gate 43 is all about having like this intuitive knowing, right? So people are constantly like projecting onto you to kind of know information to share with them, right? Isn't that kind of how it works?
The insight that will break through. And gate 50 is called, line 5, is called consistency. People would like to project upon you the consistency of the values that come out of you. So if you become inconsistent with the values you then demonstrate at a later time, you'll get called out for that. Your heresy will get you, labeled.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whoa. So these lines, guys, watch over this episode and let's wrap this up. We're done. We've talked about 6 lines of a hexagram, depending on whatever side of it's on. It doesn't matter where it is, whether it's red or it's black. The design is our unconscious. The black is our conscious. They're married together. Get to know your lines. There's a line for every hexagram.
Great job. Thank you.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you everybody who tuned in today. We really appreciate it. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the show. Tune in on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And I'm not too sure who we are going to be doing.
What do you think about Mark Zuckerberg? He's in the news, having been on Joe Rogan recently, admitting that he censors stuff.
Oh, well, yeah. Why not do the snake?
He's actually just part of the whole serpentine operation, really. So
yes, well, yeah, we know why Facebook was initially launched.
Yeah,
I think Mark Zuckerberg's really fascinating. I'm curious if he has a whole bunch of like logical circuitry to explain.
Yeah, let's find him out. Let's hunt him down, see if that's the one we'll do, and then we'll post it out if that's for sure. Because I tell you the truth, the guy that you had wanted to do, I forgot his name, Savannah. He was interesting.
Oh, Yogi Bhajan.
Again, you asked this one question, and suddenly I got stuck on that nature of him. So I don't know. So we can't say the question she asked on air. So.
Well, stay tuned, guys, to find out who we'll be doing on Wednesday night. But I think that would be good. And yeah, thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye now. Everyone.